Perhaps you want me to go back to the beginnings. She and I trained at the same art college, which was Manchester, in the 50s. I always thought she was outstanding. I mean, she was really good. I hasten to add I was somewhat of a shy boy, and the only woman I knew well was my mother. It was in a lecture, you know, a big lecture hall. The lighting would be subdued because of the projected images and so on. I remember catching sight of Janet's profile in this context. Being a simple lad, I just kind of fell in love with her or something, you know. I came in one morning, probably late as usual. A student come rushing up to me and said, "There's been a girl looking for you." And I thought, "A girl?" I went to my desk and there was this little note saying, "I pine for Northern Company, J." And I knew immediately who it was, you know. Went to the address, found Janet. 4 seconds we were in bed. I don't know whether you're supposed to say that in interviews, are you? Anyway, you can cut it out. Yeah, so we started off this sort of life together. Well, in actual fact, I got her pregnant. So we you know, more or less thought we'd better get married, like. There's a couple of photographs of Janet, but one sort of middle age, I suppose, there, and then an older one. But that would be the reason she looks so happy is because she's surrounded by her own paintings and she's got an exhibition on. Come on, I'll take you upstairs and show you Janet's workroom. People who always say, "Oh yeah, you know, I've done some painting. I was in the Lake District," and they come back with a pretty picture of mountains and streams and trees, and you think, well, fair enough. Yeah, we all know that's wonderful. I mean, we all know that's beautiful, but you don't need to actually paint it. It's just there, isn't it? Whereas something like this, most amateurs wouldn't even attempt, would they? Because it's, it's based, I mean, look at that child in the middle. I mean, it's all based on close observation, really. Because she used to draw on trains and on buses. You know, like we'd be coming back from a late night and everybody drunk on the train from Sheffield. And she'd be busy sketching, and people were oblivious. They had no idea what she was doing. They thought she was probably just writing in a diary or something. And then when she, later on, months later, she'd use the sketches and put something together like that. The thing about it with Janet, she was obsessed with, well, quite a lot of things, but clothes in particular. She made beautiful clothes, absolutely beautiful clothes. I mean, that's why I haven't chucked this stuff away, because it's not the sort of stuff you could just take to a charity shop and say, you know, do you want this? Because it's so personal, you know. I don't know what I'm going to do with it eventually. But see, she'll have made that jacket as well. And here's a rather strange jacket that she's actually embroidered on. You know, all those designs, she'll have just made them up as she was doing it. Oh, she was incredibly talented, yeah. No, she was quite a girl, really. This is an interesting example of Janet's work in the on the wall there. I remember that would be done, oh God, 30 or 40 years ago, and it was a kind of the start for her of more personal work, because it's got a lot of ambiguity in it. But it's really interesting painting, because if you look at the head, it's obviously you can tell it's a girl, but if you look at the head, you'll see that the hair looks like a bird's wing, and also the eye is actually not an eye, it's the moon. You know, and things like that, which are fairly typical of Janet. You know, that sort of ambiguity that is not entirely normal. She was a good mother. She was a good mother. But it was a difficult relationship. To me, she seemed kind of rather cool. You could look at her and you could stare at her, having known her for years, and you wouldn't have the faintest idea what she was thinking about, not the faintest. In many ways, she would seem normal. In a way. A friend of Janet's came to me and said, I'm a bit worried about Janet. And I said, well, what's the matter, you know? She said, well, she's kneeling on the floor making patterns out of chocolate biscuits. And that, although it sounds like something of nothing, was the beginning of probably the first example of psychosis. Once it really got her, she'd have these breakdowns, which were roughly once every 2 years. She was diagnosed quite early as schizophrenic. She would start off by getting very excited, you know, excited about everything, you know, the way things looked, everything. There wasn't much she could do because it would just gradually gather momentum. If she was going towards or already having a breakdown, she'd do things wrong. Those curtains, for example, they're not horizontal at the bottom, they go down. And every time I see them, it reminds me that when she did them, she was on the way to, yeah. She'd be listening to voices in her head telling her to do this and that. I mean, you know, if she'd be sitting here like me now, she'd suddenly get up and walk out of the house. I mean, and the treatment was quite rough and ready as well. They used to give her electric treatment. They put something on each side of the head and pass a current through the brain. Well, I mean, that, you can tell me just describing it, that doesn't sound like a great joke, does it? Sometimes she'd be in for weeks, and sometimes she'd be in for rather longer. You know, she usually started to recover at a certain stage. The doctors would notice that she'd start drawing again, you know, from the hospital. And then eventually she'd be well enough to come back again and start all over again. I remember one morning I was sitting at that table having my cereal. I heard this voice behind me saying, "I think you'd better call the hospital. I don't." And I said, "What are you talking about?" And she said, "Well, I don't feel very well." She decided to stop taking all her medication. For various reasons, she decided she'd had enough. Generally, once she got into the painting, it was as if she was able to channel everything into that. Somehow, she did actually eventually overcome the schizophrenia. Because schizophrenia doesn't mean, as everybody thinks it does, a split personality. It means fragmented. And I guess that maybe what Janet was trying to do when she was painting was pull these fragments together and make sense of them. So her mental state didn't evidence itself in any sort of weakness in the art. Quite the reverse, actually. And she produced all this stuff that I'm surrounded by. All I would see is what she was working on at the time. Or maybe, you know, you'd pull a few things out or you'd see things that were around the house. It wasn't until she died that I started to think about putting it together and exhibiting it, you know, which I intend to carry on with. She must have known she was good, I think. But she wasn't vain about it. That's what makes me regret that she never saw that final exhibition that I put on in Bradford and then moved to Doncaster, because that was, I think, the strongest body of her work. I'd wished she'd been there and seen it. I mean, I'm really glad that you're doing this, that you're making this film, because I think her work is brilliant. You know, the more it's seen, the more her work is seen, and, you know, the better. And I think, you know, the fact that you're drawing attention to it is a great thing, you know. I think when you're actually doing it, when you're making it, you don't think about exhibiting it. And you could argue that you're doing it for yourself. But it's a bit bigger than that somehow. It becomes the substance of your life, if you like.